welcome to Monday. It's great to have you here. Thanks for joining. So another champion has decided to go off script at the WWE and called Vince McMahon a maniac. So this is like when I said floodgates last week, whoosh. Is it going to make any difference? Is it going to make any difference that all these big guys are coming forward to say none of this is surprising? We're going to talk about some other controversies in the WWE as well, because as it turns out, there are some claims being made that the way WWE, headed by Vince McMahon, treated its wrestlers, its talent, its bread and butter was, almost like animals, forcing them onto the stage night after night after night, slamming them into the ring, injury after injury, low pay, no care, lots dead. How many died before the age of 50? How many died before 60? Just you wait till I show you all the big celebrities you loved growing up and how they are no longer with us. Is it because of the culture at the WWE? You're going to hear about that tonight. Also, Lacey Fletcher's parents are still living in her house. And if that doesn't really ring a bell for you, it should, because Lacey Fletcher was literally left and neglected to die on the sofa in her couch, and her parents watched the demise of their child, an adult with disabilities, until she literally decomposed while alive into the sofa. They're in there now, getting DoorDash and living normally. We've asked the neighbors, what on earth was going on? And we got some answers. Also, some coworkers of those parents. And you'll be surprised at some of the things you're going to hear tonight. Also, gunfire again in a house of worship, only this time it wasn't just a house of worship. It was like the Super Bowl of house of worship. Joel Osteen's church, his mega church, tens of thousands of people worship there every week. And somehow, a woman with a kid and a trench coat and a backpack walks into that church and opens fire with an AR. Folks, I don't know about you, but who are we looking for? Who in hell are we looking for anymore? If you can't go to church at Joel Osteen's mega church without a lady and her 7-year-old kid looking to open fire. Got more details about it, and also some information for you, because if you feel the same way I do, which is who the hell are we looking for, I have some answers for you tonight. International security expert who makes his living teaching the likes of you and me what to do now. Because, happening everywhere. Also, Taylor Swift has had a heck of a week. And so is her boyfriend, that guy on the field. So yeah, fresh off a big win last night, she and Travis Kelce got some bad news from the New York DA that was prosecuting the stalker who was incessantly going to her home in New York. Over 30 times, this man is accused of not just incessantly stalking her, he's accused of leaving court and getting on the subway over to her place right after. Within minutes, he's over there at her place. Bad news delivered to Taylor Swift about that guy and about what the law is prepared to do for her to him and everybody else who has a stalker like that, allegedly. Anyway, you'll find out. That's all coming up in just a moment. First, though, it is a new week, which means a whole new smoke show for WWE fans. And when I say smoke, I mean the kind is there fire? This is not the show anybody was expecting. A brand new roster of former WWE superstars is going off script and body slamming Vince McMahon for behavior unbecoming even The Undertaker. Former tag team and United States champion Matt Riddle was a guest on the Sunday Night Main Event podcast, and he said he was not surprised to hear about some of the cruel and sordid behavior that McMahon is accused of. Take a listen to this.
All the things he's done from the 80s, 90s, to early 2000s, everything. I was not surprised. I mean, some of it little, but yeah, the guy's a billionaire that owns a company, and yeah, he's probably done it all and seen it all and wants to do more and see more. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a billionaire.
He didn't sit and discuss this.
Yeah, I wasn't the dude. Brock was the dude he was talking to, or whoever else. It wasn't me. So, but yeah, So I really have no comment other than that. I mean, I I'm not surprised. I hear people say they're surprised. I'm not surprised. I mean, the guy was a maniac.
A maniac? That's something, and that's big. And the Brock that he refers to in that clip, that could be WWE superstar Brock Lesnar. In that blockbuster lawsuit that was filed last month by a former employee named Janelle Grant, Grant accused McMahon of, among other things, sharing nude photos of her with a, quote, former UFC heavyweight champion whom WWE was actively trying to sign to a new contract. And many believe that champion was Brock Lesnar, and that he's also the superstar that Grant claims she was ordered to have sex with to juice the contract deal. Grant's lawsuit also targets WWE exec John Laurinaitis and the whole WWE itself for all that culture. And lately, one of McMahon's most trusted lieutenants, Bruce Pritchard, has weighed in, if you can call it that. Pritchard is the executive director of the WWE shows SmackDown and Raw. And according to his online bio, he's responsible for all creative content, production, and programming for the WWE. Bruce Pritchard had this to say about the allegations. I have to read it because it's one of those technical things. As far as lawsuits and things of that nature, I'm not at liberty to discuss any legal matter with the company whatsoever. I'm not being sued. I'm not accused of anything. It's a legal matter. Let the rest of it sit in the hands of the fine legal system we have here in the United States of America. It is true. Bruce Pritchard's name is not in Janelle Grant's lawsuit. But former WWE champion Ronda Rousey had this to say about Bruce Pritchard after the allegations were made public. And I'm going to quote again. Bruce Pritchard is basically Vince's avatar. If he's still around, Vince still has a hand in the business. Vince was still running things through Bruce when he was, quote, gone before. And this latest mega scandal has dragged some past WWE controversies back into the spotlight, including the company's treatment of its number one asset, the wrestlers. And I am talking about big wrestling stars like these.
Mr. Perfect's going to be doing any bear hugs around him.
Man, that just brings back memories, doesn't it? Of all of those wrestling greats, they all have one thing in common. They all died before they reached their 60th birthday. The website Ranker.com has a list of the top wrestlers of the 1980s as voted by fans. These are the guys. Look at those names. You know them. 11 of these 16 names are dead. The ones highlighted died before the age of 60, 5 of them before the age of 50. There were also several high-profile deaths, early deaths among WWE stars of the 90s and of the 2000s. Here are the most common causes listed: suicide, drug overdose, and heart attack. But here are the facts. Most pro wrestlers perform between 200 and 300 days per year. Think about that. And yes, the bouts are scripted, but people, the performers really are hitting the mat. They're being dropped on their heads. This is physical and grueling, and it is night after night after night after night. They are also technically independent contractors, not employees. So that does mean they do not get health insurance. Okay, I'm starting to see things. If you think about this, honestly, pain alone could be one reason that so many ex-wrestlers turn to painkillers, turn to alcohol and drugs. Legendary wrestler Ric Flair recently appeared on Shannon Sharp's show, and he discussed why he thinks so many wrestlers die young.
But a lot of guys that were younger than you have gone on. Why?
Because I think it applies to all sports, but to our sport particularly, because of the fact that we never had a day off. They don't understand the word moderation. So, hypothetically, steroids, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if I take 1 cc of test, 1 cc of DECA, right? Mm-hmm. And I look like this, well, I should take 2.
Right.
Everything's in moderation.
Right.
WWE wrestlers have tried to unionize multiple times in hopes of forcing better work conditions, but their efforts have always been quashed by McMahon and by the WWE. I want to bring in a friend of this program, Dave Meltzer. He's a sports journalist covering pro wrestling and MMA. He's also the editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter and a definitive voice in this sport. You want answers? You call Dave Meltzer. Thank you for being on the show again, Dave. So Matt Riddle calls Vince McMahon a maniac. These are not, subtle. These are people who matter. They're people in the industry. They're people who know the culture. They know McMahon, and they're not holding back. Some people say sour grapes. Other people say, no, this is an honest assessment. What do you think?
Matt Riddle, if you know kind of how he talks, that's kind of the way he would talk. But, he was with the company and was a star with the company and had some problems and left the company. The thing that was interesting to me was that he was not surprised by the allegations, only because while some of the stuff, of course, we all knew, the stuff in the lawsuit, that shocked me. I'll just say that.
So I think it was Friday, we were talking about Bret Hart coming forward. Bret the Hitman Hart. Is nobody bigger, more famous than Bret the Hitman Hart? Maybe The Rock, but he also had some pretty scathing things to say.
Yeah,
so, I feel like I just keep wondering, why didn't people come out sooner? Why did it take this one lawsuit from Janelle Grant? A lot of people said that about Roger Ailes, right? One lawsuit came out about Roger Ailes, and it just blew the doors wide open on the industry and Roger and the disciples and et cetera. But why didn't more people come forward sooner if there was this much suffering?
Fear. Vince McMahon was the king. He was the guy who decided, if you were a success or you were a failure, and nobody wanted to cross him. That's all it really was, and some people didn't want to believe. He was a father figure to a lot of these people. So it was like, if they would hear stuff, it was like, he's just a good old boy and all that, and would want to defend him. And a lot of them saw this and changed their opinion. And some of them probably had a hard time changing their opinion because it was fueled by years and years of kind of worshiping, like you do a match and you want Vince's approval. And, that's what a lot of these guys, I've seen guys that had great matches and Vince didn't think they had a great match and was like, they get shaken because it was always about Vince's approval, because Vince is the ultimate decision maker on your career.
It's like the story we keep hearing about sexual harassment over and over. These were kingmakers. They felt like father figures. They were kind and helpful. And then suddenly it all turned to sexual advances. And, oh, dear God, what do I do now? I'm going to lose everything I've built for the last 20 years if I don't, succumb to what this jerk wants. So Bruce Pritchard is, he's being accused by Ronda Rousey of really being being controlled by the Svengali Vince McMahon. He's just the puppet. Is that true? Is that your assessment? Because if that's the case, then her accusation, and others have said, this guy is really just an avatar for Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon's still running the show. He hasn't left at all. What do you think?
Bruce Pritchard's rep has always been, loyal to Vince, yes man to Vince. Now, as far as like today, is that the case? I don't know. As far as the last time, I'm sure. They had a relationship dating back to the mid '80s. So it would be, of course that, if Vince is completely gone, that's one thing. But if he's got like a step in there and he's not completely gone, yeah, he's going to talk to Bruce, of course.
I only have like 10 seconds left, but I do got to get you on this, Dave. The number of wrestlers who've died before the age of 50 and 60, and the grueling nature of the work that they've done. Do you think something's going to happen? Do you think this can of worms is going to open up, and suddenly everything's going to be questioned? The deaths of all of these people, it's all going to be questioned based on the culture of the WWE.
Well, the one thing I will say is that era, they have made lots and lots of changes. The schedule isn't nearly as tough as it used to be. I mean, it was brutal in the 80s and the 90s. And then by the late 90s, somewhat because of this, because of the painkiller stuff and because they started drug testing and things like that, it did get better. It's not as bad as it once was, but that track record the 80s, the schedule that those guys were on was so brutal. I mean, it almost boggles my mind when I think back on that era.
It hurts to see some of those documentaries when Ric Flair talks about what he went through and a lot of his colleagues, et cetera. I said it before, I'll say it again. You want answers, you call Dave Meltzer. Thank you for being here again tonight. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you very much.
All right, Dave. Again, he's the editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Check it out. If this is your jam, that's where you get your answers. Dr. Thomas Pitts is with me now. He's a board-certified neurologist. I wanted to ask you to join the program, Dr. Pitts, just to talk about the statistics. I mean, the alarming nature of the number of people within this industry that died before 50 and 60. If it were any other industry, wouldn't there be like a 5-alarm fire?
You know, Ashleigh, just like we're seeing in football, right? There's a whole group of people like Vince McMahon that deal in essentially the trafficking of people. And we think of that in a sexual nature often, but it's also these players, these athletes. They are there to make money. There's a lot of money being changing hands here. And so, you know, there's also the willful employment aspect of this, that they are signing on to do it. But there are some rules in place to mitigate things. You must have a doctor on staff, et cetera. However, I think this should be like cigarettes. I mean, there should be a warning on the contract that says you are headed towards CTE and big time problems, and you're lucky if you're not.
I'm going to ask you about CTE in a hot minute, but first I want to just ask you about the nature of wrestling. Look, you sign up for a physical, grinding job, and it's your job to be thrown down. It's your job to be beaten up. It's your job to lose. A lot of this is scripted, right? But it's physical. That's not scripted. It hurts. And even if you're scripted to lose, you get those punches. So I'm curious about how much of that is responsible for these deaths, do you think, compared to, say, like the steroid use or maybe big men strain on their hearts, the drugs they have to take repeatedly to help kill the pain? What are your thoughts there?
It's definitely multifactorial. I mean, when you look at things like what you're signing up for an extremely physical job, like you said. And this one's particularly damaging because people associate concussion and CTE with head trauma. But I asked the medical students, can you get a concussion from being hit in the ankle? And yes, you can if it causes enough shearing force with the brain. The brain has gray matter and white matter. They're two different weights. They accelerate and deaccelerate at two different speeds and shear the nerves. That's a concussion. So just the flipping can cause a concussion. And what I would say is what's really killing these guys is not just the physical aspect. They are signing up for arguably one of the most toxic cultures in sports, where steroids are celebrated and encouraged, where alcohol use is used to mitigate pain, then later widespread use of oral painkillers with very little opportunity, like you said, for health insurance or breaks for medical care. These people are being used until they're dead and then they're disposed of. So someone like Vince McMahon can make a windfall profit.
I should mention they did, WWE did introduce a wellness program back in 2006. They were testing for drug abuse and physical and mental health, but it's not a public program. It's not something that we can look at the results of that. Dr. Thomas Pitts, thank you for being on. Really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me, Ashley.
All right, coming up after the break, I'm going to take you to Slaughter, Louisiana, where we noticed a very curious sight. Lights are on. Cars are parked outside the house where Lacey Fletcher died in a most unimaginable way. Neglected to death on the sofa, wasting away right in front of her own parents. Parents who were upstanding pillars of the community. We're going to show you what else we found about these troubled two and what the neighbors are saying about them. It's all coming up next. Could you live in a house where your own child died an agonizing death right before your eyes? Because apparently Sheila and Clay Fletcher not only can, but do. Their lights are on tonight in their home in Slaughter, Louisiana. Their cars are parked out back, and they or somebody in there ordered some DoorDash right up to that home where their daughter Lacey Fletcher, their adult autistic daughter, starved to death. She starved to death to the point where she was eating the foam from the sofa on which she literally rotted to death. While alive, she rotted. Lacey died 2 years ago, last month, at the age of 36, and though she weighed a mere 96 pounds, the first responders had a really tough time getting her off that couch on which she died. Again, it wasn't because of her 96 pounds. It was because her body had literally fused to the sofa. So here is the warning that I have to give you every time I tell you Lacey's story, because the pictures are beyond disturbing. I also have to say this, because it's important. The authorities asked us repeatedly to show these pictures publicly so that Lacey's years of torment at the hands of her parents and their neglect can finally be exposed. Sentencing's coming. So here's what happened. If you haven't seen this or heard it in detail, Lacey had her own feces all over her body, everywhere, in her ears, in her hair, all over her body, in her stomach cavity. She was found covered in bed sores and sepsis, which had stripped areas of her flesh all the way to the bone. Here's what the actual coroner's report said. Post-mortem, full thickness lacerations were present on Lacey's buttocks. These post-mortem lacerations are the result of peeling Lacey from the couch in order to be placed in a body bag. Maggots embedded in the exposed surface of the bones. It was determined that maggots were present prior to death. By way of an obituary, Lacey's church-going, job-holding, seemingly respectable parents gave her one line and one line only. And it reads this: Lacey Fletcher, daughter of Clay and Sheila Fletcher of Slaughter, Louisiana, was called to be with her Lord and Savior Jesus Christ on January 3rd, 2022, period. It says that they held a viewing before a, quote, brief graveside service, which leads me and anybody else who's watching this story to wonder, what body did they show in that viewing? What body did they present to mourners? And who were the mourners who showed up to mourn Lacey Fletcher? Friends? Extended family? Any neighbors? Did anybody actually know that she existed after not setting foot out of her house for more than a decade? And according to the coroner, possibly not getting off that couch for over a decade. NewsNation's national correspondent Alex Capriello is live in Slaughter, Louisiana tonight. He is just outside of Baton Rouge in that area. So you were able to actually knock on the Fletcher's door today. What happened?
Yeah, as far as I can tell, Clay and Sheila Fletcher actually still live in that house. Hard to believe given the details that you just provided, the horrors that actually unfolded behind that closed door. 2 cars parked out back, I can tell you that. I did not see anybody inside. Certainly no one came to the door to answer my questions. But from what I can tell from neighbors, they are certainly there awaiting their sentencing. Interestingly, it does sound like they get a lot of DoorDash deliveries. You mentioned it, and what neighbors tell me is basically a lot of food gets delivered there, and it makes sense, really, when you think about Slaughter, Louisiana. It is a very, very small town. I didn't even really count any stoplights there. So people know each other. People certainly know this story, which makes sense why they might not feel comfortable going out to eat or even going grocery shopping.
But, I mean, I look at the house, I look at the pictures of you walking up to the front door. It just looks like the nicest little place. Were you, not to suggest you were peeping, but, you know, we all have the inclination as we walk up to a front door to kind of look in and see if anybody's coming to the window or if anybody's coming to the door. As we're walking by the big windows, we, take a peek in. All we keep seeing are these horror pictures of that couch in that living room. Could you see anything through those windows? Anything recognizable?
Well, I will say that it was hard to see inside there. We went during the daytime, so not a lot of lights were on. Not to say that I didn't believe anyone was home, because I did see 2 cars parked out back. No one answered the door, but it looked like just a normal home. It is a sort of rural neighborhood. There's about 50 yards or so to get to each front door through a rural street into this neighborhood. Only about a dozen or so houses there. But everything seemed like a normal house, Americana in Louisiana.
I see the picture of you there, and I wonder how many times did someone come to that front door, just like you're doing right there, where, mom and dad wouldn't dare open that door to anyone.
Oh, yeah.
God forbid they would smell anything that was coming out from that
Right.
front room. So, which is what I keep thinking, like, what about neighbors? Did anybody ever just knock? Like, what are the neighbors even saying about this?
Yeah, it's really interesting speaking to the neighbors, because the very first neighbor I spoke to actually was good friends with Sheila and Clay. In fact, they didn't want to answer my questions because they believe that Sheila and Clay are just not getting a fair shake, which was all the more reason for me to push back and say, hey, look, that's why I'm here. We want to make sure we get both sides of the stories. If you support these two parents, these people that are accused and now have pleaded no contest to manslaughter, then we want to hear it. We want to hear about them. But really, they didn't have any interest to speak to me other than to say that they support their friends across the street. Now, a different neighbor down the street, about 2 or 3 doors down, had a completely different story. She tells me that she's been living in that neighborhood for 12 years, and she literally had no idea that their daughter was actually living there. On top of that, it's all about this horrific thing that happened right down the block. Here's a portion of our conversation together.
I can tell you that we didn't know that they had a daughter until this happened.
Oh, okay.
And my husband worked shift work, and he saw everything at 3 o'clock in the morning.
And how long have you been a neighbor? So, like, you didn't even...
I've lived here 12 years.
So you've lived here 12 years, and this entire time you didn't even know there was a girl, a daughter that was living inside that home?
No. Between, like, the sheriff's department and the slaughter cops and the coroner and the EMS and the fire department, there was a lot of...
Mm-hmm.
And it's really fascinating because here in the South, you are very neighborly with each other. You talk to each other, you check in. So to have this neighbor live down the street for 12 years and not even know a daughter was there, it really leads me to believe, on top of the other conversations I've had with other people, that really their daughter was just a well-kept secret that they just kept away from everybody.
So, look, the Fletcher, Sheila, and Clay were upstanding citizens of that community. Sheila was an alderman, and they belonged to the First Baptist Church there. And Clay was, a part of the Baton Rouge Civil War Roundtable. What are the former co-workers of Clay and the church members? What are they all saying about what's happened and about the Fletcher couple?
Yeah, I spoke to a man by the name of John Potts. He was a part of that Baton Rouge Civil War Roundtable. They meet about monthly. They have lecture series. They talk. They learn history. They share with each other. And so for 3 years, John and Clay were a part of this roundtable, getting to know each other. And very similarly to that neighbor, John tells me that he had no idea that Clay even had a daughter. It was never even brought up. But at the same time, he said that this was a complete shock because he felt like he built a good impression of who Clay was. He called him a first-class guy, Ashleigh, polite, smart, thoughtful. But at the same time, there's this deep, dark secret that's happening behind his own house that most people don't even know about. Now, as for the fellow congregants at the Baptist Church, I did stop by there. I wanted to speak to the pastor and get a sense of, well, one, are they saying anything? Have they released any sort of statement? But then two, even, how do you even talk about this with your church congregation, somebody that's a part of your fellowship? How do you even broach this topic and speak about it? And really, the pastor didn't have much to say. He was really kind of holding back on that. I did have a chance to speak to 2 women who are inside that church who knew, of course, about this story. They know Clay, they know Sheila, and really all they could say was that they're praying for that family right now.
Well, anybody who's supporting Clay and Sheila Fletcher, I sure hope that they've had a chance to look at those photographs. And I would love to know where their support comes from if they get a chance to see the pictures. I can't explain it any other way other than to say that is just one of the worst things a parent could possibly ever do to a child, no matter how old that child is. Alex Capriello, I know it's a hard assignment. Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ashleigh.
Coming up next, how do you keep people safe inside houses of God when it comes to shooters who are hell-bent on killing? Not even giant megachurches are invincible these days. The woman who opened fire on Joel Osteen's congregation walked right past security officers with her little boy in tow. Praise the Lord and seal the doors. Nobody wants their church to look like a fortress, but what the heck is the alternative? That's next. What is a safer place than a church? For centuries, they were called sanctuaries, which was actual as well as spiritual. But we are in a different world now, Dorothy. One with new headlines like the one you heard about today. A disturbed woman with an AR-15 assault rifle and a 7-year-old kid in tow, strolling into a megachurch in Houston and just started shooting. And not just any megachurch, Joel Osteen's megachurch, one of the largest in America, one of the most famous. Thank God nobody was killed except her, the woman with the rifle. But her little boy was shot in the head. He's now in critical condition, so everybody in the congregation and beyond, we're all praying for that little guy. It was off-duty law enforcement working as church security that shot that woman dead, but not before she got off a few rounds of her own. One other person was also hurt, a man who was inside the church. As terrifying as all of this sounds, and as terrifying as you might imagine it to be, it was a hell of a lot worse for those inside. Just take a look at this. Yeah, we had to beep out the F-bomb. What the? Yeah. Because when you start hearing that stuff, you start running. You start yelling things like, what the F? Because you can't imagine what's really happening. The words megachurch don't even begin to cover the scale of the attendance at the Joel Osteen Church. It runs both English and Spanish language services for a total of 45,000 people each week. The church facility is actually a former basketball arena where the Houston Rockets used to play. 45,000 people. That is more than double the capacity of Madison Square Garden. The shooter, 36-year-old Genesee Moreno, went there between services when the place was not so packed. Thank God. Imagine if her timing had been different, if that arena had been shoulder to shoulder with people, none of them expecting a woman with a child to also be brandishing an AR-15. Here's the mayor of Houston today trying to assure his citizens that churches in his city are still safe.
Every place of worship is important to the law enforcement community that stands behind me. Whether it's our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, our temples, we are going to provide you protection. We're increasing security, won't discuss publicly all provisions, but we're going to continue to make public safety our highest priority.
I want to get Sam Rosenberg in here. His company, Live Ready, trains everyone from families to workplaces in safety and provides high-level corporate and personal protection all around the world. His new book just hit shelves in December. It's called Live Ready, A Guide to Protecting Yourself in an Uncertain World. Okay, Sam, how do I do that? How do I protect myself in this now very, very uncertain world?
Well, thanks for having me on, Ashleigh. And it's an interesting topic. I mean, I've spent the last 25 years protecting people and teaching them how to protect themselves. And, you know, the gist of that answer is in the book, Live Ready. But to tell you this, you know, from the standpoint of what we just witnessed here, I will tell you that the most important facet of security is personal responsibility. Everybody has to understand that we have a role to play in the continuum of personal security, that it's good to have lifeguards like the security which performed exemplary at the Osteen Church, at the Lakewood Church. But it's also critical to recognize that while it's good to have lifeguards, you should know how to swim. And that is one of the most important facets of my mission and my message to people, is to be able to protect yourselves and to be able to contribute to the greater protection of our communities at large. And whether that's just being able to recognize the warning indicators and to alert people in advance to be able to intervene in threats, or if it's to actually be able to take action yourselves to either to defend yourselves and your family or to be able to get yourself out of a bad situation very rapidly.
You know, people who do live broadcasting always see the word L-I-V-E as live before live. So thank you for telling me it's live ready. Sorry for saying it twice as live ready, but live ready. No problem. Then I'm glad, because we do need to live ready. I think about this. I think about being in a church. I think about being at a concert. I think about being anywhere and seeing a woman with a child. And that is not a person I give a second look to, even if she had a trench coat and a backpack on. But it turns out on her AR, she had a sticker that said Palestine, said she had all sorts of anti-Semitic rants in some of her digital, and that she was in a family dispute with, I guess, an ex, maybe an ex-husband. I don't know if it was the child's father, who apparently was Jewish. All of that, you can't know that when you go to church. You can't know that the lady in the trench coat is a homicidal maniac. So I guess I don't even know what the question is, other than do I just always need to watch my six, no matter where I am? Even in my own home, I feel as though I got to watch my six nowadays.
Well, I mean, I think all of us can recognize that we can never lose sight of the reality that this is the world that we live in, and we don't have to push aside our sort of righteous indignation at that reality. That we have to worry about our kids going to school or whether we're going to a crowded environment. But the reality of it is that we not going out and not engaging in society and not going to church and not going to movie theaters and not going to concerts is effectively to let the terrorists win. And, you know, when we understand that violence truly is never random, you know, these dynamics, these acts of violence always have a pattern of behavior. They always have indicators in advance that perhaps we, as, say, parishioners or someone going to a church, doesn't have the optic to see and stop in advance. Other people do. And, you know, whether the dynamics are that we can stop these or we can recognize the warning indicators early enough to be able to intervene, or whether we have to be capable of responding, that goes back to this idea that we all have to have the capacity to be able to swim in this environment. And, you know, the security at the church, you know, was exemplary in their ability to respond decisively and quickly. And they're picking up on a lot of those indicators. It's clearly obvious from the facts that we have that they saw something that was not right. They recognized the body language. They recognized.
Right?
Yeah.
Did they
were able to
ever,
intervene.
Sam? Because I would look at a mom with a kid, and it wouldn't even matter if she had a weapon strapped on her. I would never imagine that a mom with a kid would ever use that weapon. I have to leave it there, but Sam, I'm going to have you back for sure, because I dare say it's not going to be the last time we're going to need this conversation. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Ashleigh.
Let me read that again, because Sam Rosenberg is the founder of Live Ready Security and Protection Services, and the book is called Live Ready, A Guide to Protecting Yourself in an Uncertain World. Thank you to Sam Rosenberg for putting up with me. All right, coming up next, Taylor Swift and her boyfriend Travis Kelce have been racking up the wins this month. Yes, I said Kelce. Kelce is actually how you pronounce his name. It drives me crazy. Everyone calls him Kelce. So without, question, what a great moment this is. But on Friday, New York handed Taylor a crappy moment and actually a frightening loss, and it could have dangerous consequences for others. That's next. That price has a name. It is David Crow. David Crow is a 33-year-old law student from Seattle who was arrested 3 times last month at Taylor's Manhattan townhouse. He had reportedly been seen lurking there more than 30 times since November, sometimes rummaging through the star's trash and defying court orders in the process. In fact, one of his last infractions, being released from court and heading straight across town back to Taylor's apartment, where he was, again, promptly rearrested. He faced charges of stalking and harassment and contempt until last Friday, when a New York prosecutor dropped those charges after a psych exam found David Crow unfit to stand trial. The DA's office now says that Crow will, quote, be committed to the custody of the Office of Mental Health to receive necessary treatment, end quote. What does that mean? Joining me now is NewsNation national correspondent Caitlin Becker. That's the question. What does it mean? Will now be committed to the custody of the Office of Mental Health to receive necessary treatment. Is he locked up, or is this voluntary?
It's involuntary, Ashleigh. He was transferred from Rikers to an undetermined mental health facility, and we don't know that location, and we also don't know for how long. It will really be up to the mental health professionals who are treating him to decide when he is well enough to go out into the world. And when that happens, I know the DA was felt very strongly about having a permanent order of protection for Taylor Swift. But you and I have covered these types of stories for a very long time, particularly when it comes to celebrity alleged stalkers. Oftentimes a piece of paper isn't enough to stop them. So let's hope he really does get the care he needs in this facility, because that's kind of Taylor's only saving grace in this instance.
Yeah, these pieces of paper, they're as strong as that. You can punch through them, knife through them, shoot through them, and you can certainly grab through them. It's very upsetting to hear this. Well, let's hope he gets well. Caitlin Becker, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Ashley.
Coming up, do you know the man in the sketch I'm about to show you? Rachel Morin's family hopes that you do. It is the closest thing they've had to a lead since her murder more than 6 months ago. Why now? What took them so long to release this picture? I'm going to catch you up on the investigation next. The last time Rachel Morin was seen alive was the evening of August 5th, and that's more than 6 months ago. The mother of 5 went for a walk on the Ma and Pa Trail in the suburbs of Baltimore, and she never made it home. Police say she died in a violent homicide. And despite a promising lead a couple of weeks after Rachel's body was found, there have been few leads and even fewer answers in the long months since. That one good lead, in case you've forgotten, was DNA at the crime scene, matching a man who assaulted a girl in Southern California more than 2,000 miles away. Investigators put out this video of the suspect leaving the home, and today they released a sketch, a remarkably detailed sketch of the man they believe took Rachel Morin's life. So take a good look. Can't believe it's taken this long, but do you know this man? He's believed to be Hispanic, between 20 and 30 years old, about 5 feet 9 inches tall, 160 pounds. If you do recognize him, or if you think you may know who he is, contact the Harford County Sheriff's Office in Maryland. Email rmtips@harfordsheriff.org. Again, rmtips@harfordsheriff.org. A $35,000 reward is being offered for information leading to an arrest and conviction. Rachel's family is certainly hoping the public can help find her killer, and the police are hoping that the public can help stop her killer. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. That's all for now. Cuomo starts next.
Hey, I'm Chris Cuomo. We're going to start off with watching agony in action. 2 more Israeli hostages were rescued. So many families are waiting there and here for loved ones, young, old, dead, alive, just waiting for them to be returned, 4+ months in. But the latest rescue, for all the celebration, comes on the heels of one of the most devastating attacks on the southern Gaza region of